Hi biologists, let's start by looking at the learning objectives for this lesson. At the end of this section and following the biology syllabus, you should be able to define Turgor and give a simple explanation of turgidity in plant cells. Be able to describe the application of high salt or sugar concentration in food preservation. What does this actually mean? What are we trying to understand? Well, you have to be able to define the term Turgor and give examples of it in plant cells. You also have to be able to describe the use of high salt or sugar concentration in preserving food. Let's look at the definition of Turgor. Remember, the definition of Turgor is a learning objective of this lesson, so make sure you learn the definition well. Turgor is the pressure of the contents of the cell against its cell wall. It is the pressure or the pushing of the vacuole and the cytoplasm up against the cell wall. In order to understand this idea a little better, let's revise what we have already learned. Let's get the idea in a plant cell. If you have a plant cell in distilled water, think about it again. What do we need to have here? We need to have a difference in water concentrations. The concentration of the water outside is pure water. It is 100%. You can't get any higher water concentration than that. So what will happen here? The water will move from a region of high water concentration outside to a region of low water concentration inside across the semi-permeable membrane. The vacuole will swell up, expanding, and so too will the cytoplasm, and it will push up, exerting a pressure and push up against the cell wall. It will not actually burst due to the strength of the cell wall. Now you should be able to explain how plant cells stay turgid. So, to summarize, plant cells have a lower water concentration than their surroundings. For those able for a bit more, they have a lower water concentration because the cytoplasm has a lot of dissolved salts and sugars. As a result, water will enter by osmosis. Don't forget, water travels from a high water concentration to a lower water concentration, which is inside in the cell. So the water will enter. When the water enters, the vacuole will collect the water and the cell will swell up against the restraining walls. The cell will not burst because the cell wall is so strong. How do plant cells wilt? Again, to understand this idea a little better, let's revise what we have already learned in another video. What will happen if the plant cell is in a salt solution? Well, what do we need to have here again? We need to have a difference in water concentrations. This time, the water concentration is 90% inside because cytoplasm is 90% water. So the water will move from a region of high water concentration inside to a region of lower water concentration outside across the semi-permeable membrane. So the water will move out of the vacuole, which will shrivel up, hence the cytoplasm will shrivel up, and the cell membrane will move away from the cell wall. It will no longer be exerting a pressure on the cell wall. The cell is then said to be plasmolyzed or to be flaccid. In other words, it's rather wilted or weak. Again, as a result of our revision, we should realize that plant cells have a higher water concentration than the surroundings. Remember, osmosis is the movement of water from a high water concentration to a lower water concentration. Therefore, the water will move out of the cell to the surroundings. It will flow out of the vacuole. The cell will shrink and it will become flaccid. Now we have to understand how osmosis is used to preserve food. We have to understand the use of high salt or high sugar concentrations to preserve food. Fish and bacon are salted or cured. You might know that you've salty bacon. The bacon is put in salt. You also have tuna or sardines in brine in a tin. Brine is another word for a salty solution. Jams and marmalade have a lot of sugar in them as well. The food is actually a region of low water concentration. Remember what we learned on how plant cells wilt. This is the same idea or concept. When the microorganisms land on the food, the salty meat, the sugary jam or marmalade, they lose water by osmosis. The microorganisms will shrivel up and die. They can't decay the food, so it's preserved or saved from decay. Make sure you know that it is the microorganisms that shrivel up and die. A lot of people make the mistake of saying that the food shrivels. There you have it. Remember, practice in a jotter. Now that we have reached the end of our lesson, have we achieved our objective? Can you define Turgor and give a simple explanation of turgidity in plant cells? Can you describe the application of high salt or sugar concentration in food preservation?